welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be talking about something that most people just seem to shy away from, especially when it comes to television and radio. Either that or we try to make a big production out of it to soothe the fact that each and every one of us are going to be facing this inevitably toward the end of our lives. We just don't know when that's going to happen, and that's simply dying. On the program today, I'd like to welcome to the program our guest, Miss Carolyn North, and she's produced a fabulous book called The Experience of a Lifetime, Living Fully, Dying Consciously. Carolyn North, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today.
Well, it's my pleasure, Daniel.
Now, how did you embark on this particular journey to write this book?
Well, it was actually kind of in self-defense. I was going through a period of my life where everybody I knew, it seemed, was getting cancer, AIDS, committing suicide. People younger than myself, for the most part, were just dying around me right and left. And since I work as a healer, and since many of these people were friends, I ended up being in a position to help them make their passage. And it was... I really was so bereft that I didn't know what to do except go more deeply into the subject. I mean, I decided that that's the way I would protect myself through this really difficult period. It was over a period of about 2 years, I guess. I lost over 30 people, and the last person to go was my younger sister. So I just started diving into the subject of death and dying. And learning everything I could about it. And I was so gratified to discover that by doing that, I discovered that death was fine. It was safe. that we all did it, and it was just a passage to another state of living. So that was my conclusion after being with many of these people and then doing all of that research.
Now, were there any surprises for you as you embarked on this particular journey and you put these stories into your book, The Experience of a Lifetime?
Well, yes. I mean, I think the whole thing was a surprise. I think I knew in a kind of abstract and intellectual way that death was not the end of our consciousness, but I had never experienced it really close up. So what I noticed with person after person, after they actually as they were actually making their passage, that I could feel them move into another realm and actually follow them for a little bit and saw that they were fine. That nothing of their conscious awareness had left, but their bodies had worn out for one reason or another and had died, but that they were still alive. And it was so palpable and so emotional. I mean, there were certain people with whom I could actually plan in advance, okay, when I will be coaching you to let go of this element and that element and that element, and would you please report back to me, however you can, what your experiences are. And in a couple of cases, it worked. And I actually got to see what they were seeing. Now, how this works, I have no idea. But altogether, it was reassuring and you might even say fun. I mean, fun, not really fun. But certainly extremely interesting and unexpected.
Now, you said to yourself through this experience with these people that, you just mentioned fun. Most people kind of take a look at this particular subject and, they'll talk about it, or as you mentioned earlier, you sort of intellectualize it. But there's a difference between that and feeling and a sense of knowing. That certain threshold that you cross between knowing what the unknown is and actually going beyond understanding, but that certain personal knowing. What was that like for you?
It's hard to describe the ineffable. But one way that you kind of know is that you are, or I was, I should say, brought into the mystery of the larger universe that we live in, that I kind of got it. And it's an emotional thing. It's not mental, really. It's a kind of, at the very same moment that you're losing somebody, you are also being shown this, the enormity of this miraculous universe that cycles us, cycles all life as part of what it is. And that recognition, that realization that we're bigger than we thought we were, that the whole thing is more gorgeous and more complex and deeper than we thought it was thrilling, really. It's hard to talk about in a kind of general way, because it was, in fact, different with each person. But it was, in each case, joyous, even as I was losing somebody I loved. And, of course, the missing of them in my life, that came later. But during the actual passage, there was a sense of real gratitude to them for showing it to me, and to realizing that the world was much larger than I had ever imagined.
I find it interesting over the 15 years that I've been broadcasting, and from time to time, this subject seems to come up. And it's really fascinating because I remember back in the 90s, as I was having dreams from time to time where I was dying myself, that in the dream it's sort of, you know it's happening. You want to reach out to somebody, please help me. But at the same time, there's an underlying sense of embarrassment that this is happening to me.
Yeah, almost like it's a failure.
Exactly. In fact, they say a lot of people who die choking deaths die because they run off somewhere. And they die just simply because they don't reach out to somebody, I'm choking to death, please help me, kind of a situation. But finally, I decided, as this was happening, I'm going to allow myself to go, to die.
How interesting.
And that's what I thought, too, being lucid, or as a lucid dreamer, if you will. So I said, I'm going to let myself go. This is the time I'm going to let myself die in this dream. And I was incredibly amazed by the outcome. Now, this is a dream, though, see?
Yeah.
But still, it wasn't any less real for me.
Right.
I could not believe how incredibly beautiful things really were. Now, probably we gather this information where, there's that trip through the tunnel and then there's the light, which you talk about or you have in your stories throughout the book. But I can't describe that feeling of reverie that I had, apparently such as some of the people that you feature in your book that had that same experience, of the near-death experience, or the actual they've died experience, but then they were resuscitated. Now, that's an incredible feeling to realize that it's okay. So what am I afraid about once I wake up and I'm living?
Right. Well, I think what we fear, I've thought a lot about this over the years. I think basically what we fear is not being. The me who is talking to you now should be blotted out from the universe. I think that is a basic and very real terror, to lose our identity, to lose our conscious selfness. And I think what I learned through these experiences, but also a dream that I had much earlier in my life, that in fact you don't disappear. You're still there. and there's a kind of realization that comes with it of the world, well, as I said, the world is bigger than you thought. It's that this Earth plane existence, that we have in our bodies is one phase of a much larger thing that's going on. And it's sort of the phase of experiencing limitations of matter. And we do that, and it's hard, and we all struggle and we suffer. But we think it's all there is. But it's not. It's kind of, I think, it's more like, I think of it as boarding school. We're here for a while to get trained in physicality and to deal with all the hard stuff that comes up as a way of evolving our more eternal parts. Call it the soul, call it the spirit. And that the lessons that we learn here, we then take with us wherever the elsewhere is. And this dream that I had, I must have been in my 20s, and it was shortly after my father died. And I was really spooked. I was grieving, but I was also totally spooked by the image of him in his coffin. Mm-hmm. And I just couldn't get over it. And then one night I had a dream. And in the dream, I'm walking right at the edge of a sea cliff, a very high cliff. And I realize that I have to pay very, very close attention because if I slip at all, I will fall to my death. And so I'm paying very close attention until one moment my attention wavers and I fall. And for that split second of realizing it's over, I am in the utmost terror, just frozen terror. And then what happens is that I don't fall in this dream. I float. And I find myself in a different medium. It's like it's lighter there, and I'm held aloft, and it's perfectly safe, and it's beautiful, and I'm ecstatically happy. So I realized, I woke up from this realizing something about you don't die and disappear, you simply go elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And that was a very profound dream, and I think basically correct.
When you take a look at physics this day and age, it, as soothing for a lot of people as it seems, they still tend to hold on.
Right.
And you kind of think to yourself, what is it that we're holding on to?
Right.
And I wonder if it is just, and where it comes from, I don't know, but it certainly, seems to feel this way for a good portion of people, is that we feel insignificant. What do you think?
We feel insignificant. I would put it more positively, actually. I think the world is a miracle, and who wants to leave? Mm-hmm. I think life is an extraordinary adventure, and we're at this amazing party, and when it's over, we don't want to go home. Mm-hmm. So I think transitions are kind of the issue here, rather than our feeling like if we're so insignificant that if we go into this larger world, we will be nothing. I think, and I think also that the force of habit is very, very strong. So what we know is being in our bodies and living on this world, doing what we're doing, knowing who we're knowing, and it's like moving to another house in a different city. You don't know who's there. You don't know what it's going to be like. So you're kind of scared.
Now, Carolyn, talk about the people that you have in your book, The Experience of a Lifetime, and why these particular stories, because they really seem to be different, but they kind of arrive at the same conclusion to let us know, hey, wake up, would you? Because to die well is to live well.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you about the particular people, and also to say that what I discovered with the first one, who was a woman by the name of Lynn Hendricks, who died at the age of 42, way, way too young, a very full-of-life woman, who I met in the Galapagos Islands, of all places, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
That's the last place you would go to with such a diverse species of animals on the planet.
Really. She was in her early 30s then, and I was in my late 30s, I think, and we were both on adventure. She was a biologist, and she was on a little fishing boat going between one island and the other, and I was on a little fishing boat going between one island and the other, and their boat broke down. So we were radioed by their boat, and we went and rescued them. And so when I met Lynn, they put out a plank between these two little fishing boats, and she crossed the plank from one boat to the other. And that was my introduction to this wonderful woman. And we became very close friends after that and long after we left the islands as well. So what I discovered with her, what I sort of evolved with her, was during the last 2 years of her life, I encouraged her to do what she did best. She was an artist as well as a biologist, and did sort of natural world etchings and photographs and wonderful stuff. So what I did was I encouraged that process. She could no longer teach biology because she wasn't well enough, but she could do art. And so I helped her kind of make her last statements, really kind of keeping her busy, but busy with what she did best, so that those last 2 years of her life we had showings of her work, we made a book, so we were busy all the time, and it was very joyous and a wonderful way for she and I to be together, and a wonderful way to leave her legacy of her beautiful work. So I learned that through Lynn, and I did it with each of the other people. I sort of took what their gift was and then helped them bring it out and create it in those last months or years of their life. So one was Jim Hickman, and Jim I met through Lynn. He was a botanist, a very well-known and well-respected botanist, who died much too young also, in his early 50s, of AIDS. And oh goodness, I'm going to cry. I miss these people so much.
I remember the fascinating letter that he had actually written that you feature in this book, and I can understand why you feel this way.
Oh, what a man. Mm-hmm. What a man. He was really one in a million. And he'd had a hard life. He was gay at a time, a gay scientist at a time when that was sort of not really permitted in the university. And he had to be true to himself and also true to his work, which was brilliant. It was seminal work that he did about the fungal web in the soil all over the earth, that living web that connected us all, and the metaphors that implied. So wonderful, wonderful guy. So, but he was really sick toward the end and certainly couldn't teach at the university and couldn't do much except be depressed, and that was not okay with me. So what we did together was we did a biological encyclopedia of one area of California, and it's a beautiful place with redwoods and meadows, and Mendocino County is a very gorgeous part of the state. And so we did the flora and fauna of Mendocino County, of one section of Mendocino County, which meant that he got to do his work, and I got to go out into the field with Jim and walk the trails in the redwood forests and go to the beaches and wander in springtime over the meadows and looking, and he was teaching me constantly about the plant life, the herbal life, the bird life, the insect life. He knew everything, an incredible naturalist. So we did that, and that was published after he died. And then, let's see, the next one was a woman I call Alice, who was a stained glass designer. And she died, she had cancer, and she was in her 70s. And she and Jim were ill at the same time, so I was kind of dividing my time between them and resenting the universe for doing that, because these were two of my favorite people in the world. She was also totally amazing, beautiful artist, and wanted to finish the design of her last large installation, stained glass installation, before she went. And she also, she was 75, and you could consider that she'd had a good long life and she could be philosophic about it and ready to go. But no, she was not. Jim was at the age of 50. She was not at the age of 75. And so what I did with her was I spent as much time as I possibly could with her and helped to transcribe the design of this stained glass window and be a kind of go-between between her and the man who was going to actually do the work. So that was Alice, and then there's is Duncan next? I don't remember. Is there one more?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, and Duncan was my closest friend. And Duncan also died of AIDS, and he was a singer. And before he died, in the last year and a half, what we did was concerts. That guy was amazing. He sang his last concert, I think, 3 weeks before he died. And by that time, he had the kind of the coughing AIDS and the coughing choking AIDS. He couldn't talk, but he could sing. And that's what I did with him. We just created performances one after another. So I think we did 4 performances, and he was very beloved in our community and a gorgeous musician. And so each of these concerts was packed, and everybody each time thought this was the last time they were going to get to hear Duncan. And of course, he rallied, and then we'd say, okay, let's do another one.
Mm-hmm.
So does that answer your question?
Absolutely. The thing is that in each of these stories that you feature here in your book is that we become inspired about what we have, but at many times take so much for granted. I'm going to go ahead and do that tomorrow. I'll get to that next week. But then you take a look at what you're doing in that single moment or in that specific day, and you don't realize at times, how can you be so sure that you've got that next moment, that next day, or that next week? And when this happens, you become inspired because you realize, I do have that. But some people simply just keep walking the same direction.
Yeah, I think most of us, unless it sort of hits us in the face like a pie or something, don't take death seriously. We don't realize that we're not here forever. And I think a lot of our problems, a lot of our economic problems, stem from that feeling that that we're here forever. Like we can buy land and own the earth. I mean, that's crazy, really, when you think about it.
Especially when you see people who are in such a glutton when it comes to that.
Exactly, and it destroys that kind of economy sort of destroys us all, and it's partly a sense of denial. Really, most of us live to 8 decades. So that's, if you really look at it objectively, that's 8 times 10 years. That's nothing. So if you can get it that you're not here forever, then the significance of your time right now changes. It's precious. You got to use it. You can't waste it. The phrase "killing time," that's sort of insane. You don't want to kill time. You want to use it. So for me, that was certainly the case, and I learned it when my father died in my 20s, that I couldn't put anything off. And in my case, what it was that I wanted to be a dancer, and I had somehow never done it. And after my father died, I became a dancer. I mean, I realized if I'm going to die at the same age that he died, I only have 20 years left. And if I want to be a dancer, I better do it right this minute. And so I did it. I mean, it was sort of late in life to become a dancer, but I did.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what I do now, and it's what I teach.
Yeah, that's actually a fascinating thing that you would say that. Just recently I was talking with a woman, and we got into that conversation where she had actually mentioned that she had studied ballet, then went into modern dance, and now she is sort of an associate manager, if you will, for a very large restaurant chain.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, how is your dancing? Do you still do that? Because myself, I really enjoyed doing that in my junior high school years and high school years.
Mm-hmm.
And there was that feeling of really being alive. When you do something, when you vibrate into that person that you truly are, when you understand that gift,
yeah,
and you actually use that. I describe this to people. I said, you never know a euphoria greater than when you express yourself intentionally. That who you are, you actually give that to the world, not because you want the world to respond, but simply because that's who you truly are, regardless of what it is. And she says, no, I don't do that too much anymore. And I said, what is that like for you? Now, I don't remember that I ever really got an answer out of that, but it was exciting for me to talk with somebody who at a time found that that was their passion, and now this is what they do.
yeah, it's kind of sad and realistic, and I don't know what all. But I discovered exactly what you're describing, that when I do what I love passionately to do, I use 100% of myself. I use more than 100% of myself. So I'm truly, truly alive.
And you really lose yourself in it as well, which is even more magnificent. Yeah,
you lose yourself, and through that you find yourself at a deeper level. And that's living. I mean, that's joy. And I think that's what we're here for. I think anything less than that is not really what our souls have come in for. So, and when I compared the way it felt to dance to the way it felt to do almost anything else, there was no contest. You know, even if I could never be a great performer or anything like that, I had to dance. As some people have to write, or my husband has to do science. He adores it. So, finding that thing which is for you, your heart's desire, I think is part of what we're here for. And my suspicion is that if we die, that when we die, if we haven't done it, I suspect that we have this, oh my God, I missed my chance kind of feeling. Of course, I won't know until it's my turn, but that's what I suspect.
I remember Bruce Lee, which many people remember, dying at the age of 32. Now, there was a guy that was just dynamite. And if anybody ever sees any documentaries or reads about this man, he truly, through the martial arts, which was his way, was trying to teach people how they can, as he would say, honestly express themselves. You know, that was what he was really, truly trying to teach through the martial arts. In the day, you know, everybody had a specific way that you did things, and he sort of followed the dogma, but then all of a sudden realized, wait a minute, you know, there really isn't any one specific way that all of us can achieve this. There is just your own way. And that's, you know, what he tried to give to the world, and you know, in the end, he's still a legend, alive to this day and age.
Yeah,
and it's interesting, you know, that we can have iconic figures like that, but yet they all pretty much say the same thing. You know, what is that special purpose that you have, and have you honestly expressed that? You don't have to become legendary. The fact is, you just have to simply do that. That's the experience.
Yeah.
And that's what you have in your book. I think it's beautiful.
Well, thank you. I think it's really important, and I've discovered it over the years doing healing work. I mean, what I do is I'm a healer using dance. That's what I do. And what I've discovered with person after person is that if you go for what they love, I ask everybody at some point, what is your heart's desire? What would you do if you could have it any way that you wanted? And don't think about what's realistic in your life right now. Just if you could do whatever you love most, what would it be? And the answers are always unexpected and quite wonderful. And I'm remembering one particular person who sort of said very shyly, well, what I'd really love to do is be a pop singer. And this is a woman who had never done music at all. So, and she was having all kinds of problems in her life. Nothing was really working. So I suggested to her that she go for it. Just, okay, you're not going to be a famous pop singer, but why don't you, there's a music workshop program over there, and I gave her the information. I said, why don't you just look into it? Well, what's so fascinating is that what happened to her, the first thing that happened to her was that she met the man she fell in love with there. Mm-hmm. So it was, she was going in the right direction for her. She was lonely, she'd been divorced, and so she was going toward what she loved and was able to solve some of her other problems through it, and then indeed has become a songwriter. She's not a singer, but she writes songs and does musical plays, and they're brilliant, and she's happy. So, my feeling is that if we do what we love to do, even if it feels very impractical, somehow in that direction we're going to find what we need. And I see it happen over and over again with people.
I just recently finished a novel called The Alchemist. Mm-hmm. And they were
talking...
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting as you read this that they talk about your personal. I'm trying to remember how they put it, but basically, what your life's purpose is. That when you know what that is, that the universe conspires to make you successful.
Yeah.
And having that, and I sometimes wonder, and as you read this book. That you have here, The Experience of a Lifetime, that maybe we have a lot of these problems when we get off track, and those problems are trying to push us back onto it. Mm-hmm. And even though once we get on track, you're still going to have challenges, you get up every day and you face those going, so what? I love what's going on here. It just, it feels easy. But when you're not doing it, then it seems hard.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think that's really a very important point that, and it's borne out again and again in my own life, is when I'm doing what I love to do, the universe helps. It's almost as if the universe wants our gladness, wants our happiness, and wants our beauty. And when we provide that, which we do when we're loving what we're doing, then it's somehow we're in sync with it. Or I don't know how to explain this all, but it always happens that when I'm doing the right thing, meaning that I'm having a good time doing it, I get help from unseen corners. I don't know where it comes from, but I've learned that I can count on it. It's like these magical synchronicities that happen. I need something for the next step of whatever I'm doing, and then I will bump into somebody in the street or, it happened this week. Let me tell a wonderful story that happened this week. I have a new book out, and I'm trying to find ways of getting it promoted. So, and I use story as my modality to talk about the deeper issues of the world, like life and death. And I was wondering, how do I'm not very good on the internet. That's not my thing. But that's how everybody gets their work out. How am I going to do this? And then I received an email from a stranger, a young man in New York City, and I live in California, so the other side of the country, who used to have a friend by the name of Carolyn North, and he thought he was contacting her again. And he looked up her website, which wasn't hers but mine, as it turned out, and he contacted me, thinking he was contacting her. Anyhow, I responded to him because he was interested in reinventing the world through stories, and I thought, well, gee, that's kind of what I do. I'm gonna answer him and tell him, well, I'm not her, but I am me, and I'm interested in what you're doing. Tell me about it. The result is this young man, who is right in that generation that knows how to maneuver in the social media and is so enthusiastic about me and my work that he's going to do this for me.
Oh.
And, you know, he found me through the ethers by a mistake. So, I mean, I love it when that kind of thing happens. And like you said, when you're kind of doing your own thing well and loving it, these magical, unexpected assists from the universe tend to happen. So I was really excited about that when it occurred. And he and I have since had a long telephone conversation, and we realized we're absolutely on the same beam, and he wants to help, and I'm going to help him in the ways that I can. Mm-hmm. And there's this new collaboration that's been set up by magic.
Interesting. I know that when I embarked finally and doing radio, which was about 12, 13 years ago, and it was interesting how, you know, certain events kind of pushed me in this direction. And I had landed myself in National Public Radio as a volunteer, that how quickly it had actually happened. You know, to give you an interesting idea, I remember when I walked into a radio station one time, and it just so happened the station manager and the program director were talking with each other. There was these two women, and I just walked in one day, and I had this fear, and I don't know why. And I said, this is what I want to do. And they said, really? Well, you have a pretty good voice for it. You know, you really should go ahead and give us a resume, and you know, we'll talk about it. And I thought to myself, well, God, that was awfully easy. And this is actually what I said to him. I said, for some reason, I expected barbed wire and machine guns.
Oh, how sad. Why?
I have no idea. I really don't know, because it was something I always wanted to do as a kid, you know, to spin records and to be a disc jockey. Now, here's what's interesting. I kind of put that aside, and it wouldn't be for another couple of years before I actually really pursued it. And that's what landed me in the PBS as a volunteer through a Toastmasters meeting. And here was a man who was talking about how he wanted to be the world's greatest radio interviewer, and I thought I would talk to him about that. He says, go down and talk to this guy. So I said, okay, sure. And that's what I did. Figured, you know, one step at a time. And so this man says, well, what do you really want to do? And I said, well, I'd like to just be on the air, you know. I'd like to be a radio broadcaster. He says, really? He says, well, I'll tell you what. This guy's coming in studio today. Why don't you go ahead and interview him?
Just like
really?
that?
Just like that, seriously.
Wow.
So I looked at the clock, and he had a book, and it had to do with, you know, ecology and the like. And so I figured, well, I've got 3 hours. I'll just kind of thumb through and read as much as as I can. So this guy comes in the studio, and we sit down, and we start the interview, and I start just asking him questions based on what I'd read in the book. I watched this guy light up right across from me. Like, he actually read my book. He actually knows what he's asking me.
Boy.
Now, what was interesting about that is that was sort of always who I was with people. I always found people that you could bump into them on the street. It didn't matter where, that if you had time to talk with them, I just had this way of just asking questions where you'd realize you're standing in front of one of the most fascinating people that nobody knows about. You know, there'd be people who were involved with NASA projects, for instance, that you just wouldn't know on the street were people that were involved with things like this. So here I am with this guy, and all of a sudden it hits me, not only am I really enjoying this, lighting this person up, but I would have never thought about being a radio host who would interview people.
And here you are.
Here I am many years later doing the same thing, and I sat there and I was talking, and it was amazing to me how fast this happened. 3 and 4 months into what I was doing in the beginning, I'm talking face-to-face with the same people that you see on the mainstream network television programs. It could be Oprah Winfrey, it could be 2020, and for some reason I thought, didn't you need a college degree and a big, long initiation process to be right in front of these people? And they were sitting here with enthusiasm talking with me. Yeah. And I thought, wow! You know, yeah. But it's amazing, as we've been talking about here, that when we really live fully, that when we engage in who we are, it's amazing how the universe truly conspires to see us successful.
It's really true, and the magic. I mean, I've found over the years that not only is the magic just like a glorious opera story, but it can be counted on. Now that may not be exactly the way I mean it, but you know how as you go through your day, you you know that you can use your hands. And you know that your feet will carry you from one place to another, and that your mouth will talk, and you know your body kind of works for you. Mm-hmm. Well, by the same token, this magic becomes part of your tools of living. And I find that when I can sort of relax, when I can allow myself to let go of control and be taken by surprise, when I can trust, sort of have faith on some very deep level, then that happens. Then I can count on it. If I try and control it and make it, and sort of decide an imposed idea on it or on anybody, it doesn't work. It's got to be almost like part of a river flowing, and then as it flows by, you grab it. It's quite wonderful. I have another story that occurred to me when you were talking about the radio, and that is that when we lived in India, I met an Indian musician, a flutist, who was a brilliant flutist, and his family wouldn't let him be a musician. They wanted him to go into the family business. And he was
oh no, not the family thing again.
It's the family thing again. And poor guy. I mean, he's clearly meant to be an artist in a family of merchants, and they just didn't get him. So he requested, we did a concert together at our house and made a recording of it, and he asked when I got back to America if I couldn't play it for people and find a way for him to come here. And got home, was very busy, didn't pay attention to it for about a year, and then felt really guilty that I wasn't coming through for this young man. So I woke up one morning and I knew that today I had to do it. So I called our local public radio station and said, I have this recording of an Indian musician. I wonder if there's any way you can play it on the air. And the guy said to me, he said, I can't believe this. He said, we've been waiting for our 11 o'clock show to come in, and it never arrived. And we desperately were searching around the studio right this minute, trying to find something to replace it. Could you come right down? So I raced down to the station, put his music on, spoke a little bit about who he was, and said that he wanted to come to this country. And that was the end of that. I got home maybe an hour later, and my phone was ringing. And it was somebody who had been, it's such an amazing story. He had happened to turn on the radio, heard this musician. He was a member of the local College of Indian Music. Ali Akbar Khan had a College of Music in Marin County here. And they had met the night before and had discussed looking for an Indian flute teacher, a North Indian flute teacher. And this guy, it had been his charge to find the teacher. And he had happened to turn on the radio that morning and heard who he wanted.
And there it is. You
And
know,
there
when we're really alive, when we're really engaged in who we are, it seems miracles are all around us constantly.
Constantly. And it's so much fun. I mean, I love actually waking up in the morning and thinking, what's going to happen today?
Absolutely. Now, is there a website people can find out more about your work and what you do?
Well, yes, and there are even two, actually. One is in process right now. But the website that I've had just about my work in general is www.healingimprovisations.net. So it's the two words without a healingimprovisations with an S, .net. And the new one, which will be up, I think, by the end of this week, is Carolyn North Books. And it deals specifically with my books. And there are 12 now, I think, maybe 13. And also, what we're very excited about is an interactive blog based on my most recent book, which is called Serious Fun, Ingenious Improvisations on Money, Food, Waste, Water, and Home. And what it is just that, ingenious improvisations, low-tech things that people are doing that can be done in dealing with the dire issues of our time. And what we're looking for is people with ideas. So we want this to be a place where people can exchange ideas on these basic subjects, can meet each other. I think of it as a kind of matchmaking site. I'm hoping that people will meet through that site, find that they've met somebody who has the same sensibility that they have, and then they fall in love and live together. That's fine. Sort of, stacked functions in the permaculture sense, so you're doing many things at once. So I'm thinking of it may be a great way to meet somebody that you fall in love with. So I would check it out if I was you. It's not up yet. It will be in a couple of days, but it's at carolynnorthbooks.com, I guess. But I think what the woman who is doing this new website said that when it comes up, it will be the first thing that you see under my name, Carolyn North. So if you Google it, that will come up first.
Well, certainly that sounds like a fascinating subject that we should bring on the program here down the road, definitely. Because we actually, through the more than almost 7 years or just over 7 years we've been broadcasting Beyond 50, is that we try to take a look at ways that are viable, that people are actually doing, that, as people approach at times, midlife, but we certainly have seen our show mentor even younger people where they thought to themselves, geez, I was kind of caught up in this conditioning, as you mentioned earlier about the flute player and his family. This is the way I should be doing things, but I knew down inside it just wasn't really vibrating with who I was. But they tend to feel sort of helpless because they don't see anything beyond that reality that would attest or at least support the direction they want to move in their lives. And so we try to produce these segments where people realize somebody is doing it. Somebody is successful at doing that, of breaking out of that modality that they get caught up in. I mean, think about it this way. I mean, don't we spend the first 30 years of our lives in general really trying to live within a modality we grew up believing was real, even though perhaps underneath we thought to ourselves, I don't know that this is working too well, and you start to break free, and you begin to live authentically. And that isn't for everybody, but I'm saying most people, this is just how it is. And by the time you're 50, you get to this point where I just don't give a damn anymore, because I don't have as much time left, or at least that's the feeling, as I thought I had when I was in my teens and 20s, where you think you've got a lifetime, I'll put it off until tomorrow, and all of a sudden tomorrow's here and you realize I'm at midlife now. I don't know. Maybe I ought to get started.
Yeah, right.
And
there's
really
no
amazing.
time like the present, and it's never too late.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. The book is The Experience of a Lifetime, Living Fully and Dying Consciously. Carolyn North, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel. You're a wonderful man to talk with.
Please give your website out again.
One is carolynnorthbooks.com, I guess, which should be up by the end of this week. And the other is Healing Improvisations. I'll spell that out. HealingImprovisations.net. And next time I will title my websites much shorter.
Hey, one step at a time, and long steps lead to a journey, don't they?
I guess.
Carolyn North, again, thank you for being on our program today.
And thank you, Daniel.
You betcha. We also want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. Be sure to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you again for joining us. And remember, live your day past happy.